What I personally would have liked to have seen in a Bioshock game is sort of a broader range of enemies. And I think in Bioshock Infinite, we really want to have a sort of a class of enemies that had a sort of a more imaginative range of powers. And we came up with this concept called the heavy hitters, who are enemies that are sort of used to not just be more powerful, but also to augment the abilities of the more traditional Bioshock enemies. You're gonna come across them in certain areas of the game, and they're gonna provide a really unique challenge.
Red is the price of liberty.
You know, we wanted an AI that really expressed sort of the very sort of clear system of beliefs that founders have, and a heavy hitter that would sort of represent that. And the Motorized Patriot is sort of the embodiment of that.
And they came up with this idea of this creepily motorized, like Hall of Presidents animatronic George Washington. It was specifically the face, specifically this weird, like, porcelain child dolls, you know, poor rendering of George Washington. That kind of clinched it.
Everybody saw it and said, okay, we can roll with that. It's one of those rare moments where you kind of all come together and you realize, okay, this is going to work. We're all on the same page here. Let's just move forward with what we got.
I can use a turret! On it!
Booker, the gear!
So the Motorized Patriot, a couple of things make him really special besides the aesthetic of him. One is that he's, unlike most of the enemies, he's completely fearless. He doesn't have a sense of self-preservation, so he'll just keep coming at you and coming at you and coming at you.
You know, despite the fact that you face many different kinds of enemies in this game, you clearly can't reason with this one. He's just gonna keep coming forever, you know? He is sort of a clockwork Terminator.
The other cool thing about him, he's got this Gatling gun called a pepper mill. But once you destroy the Patriot, Booker can actually go pick up the pepper mill and actually use it as a heavy weapon. And that's the only place he can get it, was from a destroyed Motorized Patriot.
I mean, I also like that, you know, as he starts to take serious damage, his head he actually loses the Washington mask, and it reveals his sort of metal skeleton underneath.
The thing I like most about this guy is that I think he's pretty readable as what he does. You know, he's a fairly simple guy. He's not a Swiss Army knife. He's a guy with a big gun, and I think that reads pretty well.
He's got this incredible sense of heaviness. He's relentless, and just hearing sort of the things he's saying is both funny and kind of terrifying. But he's, you know, a deadly, deadly enemy. So the handyman, or the handymen, there's a bunch of them in the world, are they're sort of a tragic figure. And I don't want to go into a ton of detail about sort of how these guys got put in these metal bodies, but there's a certain sadness to who they are and how they got there. But I'd rather the gamers find that out in the course of the game.
The term handyman comes from his giant porcelain hands that we created. And if you look at toys of that era, they do a lot of work on trying to make the porcelain dolls feel realistic with the way that they paint the hands and the faces, but they're not quite there. It's almost like the original incarnation of Uncanny Valley.
Then we have back and forth and a lot of different designs. One with, you see, like exposed organs, but it was just too on-the-nose video game, with clothes, without clothes, with this head, with that head, until the one that we finally settled on, which is, you know, the exposed heart and the torn clothes and, you know, the bald sort of cut up face.
And they have a range of abilities. They can leap these great distances in the game, and you'll sometimes see them coming in from the sky and landing from a great height, and then they'll be bouncing around in this space. They're quite agile for their size and quite powerful. I think their coolest ability, though, is they can pick up AIs, like friends or foes, and they can toss them at people. And so I think that everybody around them finds them quite terrifying, including sometimes your enemies, because they just become tools of the handyman to get at Booker. Look, the Boys of Silence, I love them because they're just creepy. I mean, First time I saw it, I think it's rarely this happens where I just see a concept and I'm like, oh my God, we have to do that, we have to do that.
He was spec'd pretty early, and so the concept went in pretty early. And Ken fell in love with the concept instantly. Instantly, we all did. We all thought it was like the coolest thing we'd ever seen. I mean, anytime you completely obscure something's face, there's a creepiness that falls naturally out of wondering what's going on in there. You know, is it this hideously deformed child? Is there a head at all? You can only assume that it's horrible to be inside that mask, and yeah, I think that's where a lot of his scare value comes from.
So, you know, the way they work is that they're blind, they can't see you, but they can hear you. And the levels that you see them in, you have to make a decision on whether you're going to try to sneak around them or engage them directly. But if you anger them, they can call in backup.
Their purpose in the world is that they're sort of, I mean, think of the cameras from Bioshock 1, but think of them walking around and moving and looking for you. And he's gonna be, I think he's gonna be scary in the game and somebody the players are gonna love to meet but also hate to meet. So the Siren is sort of our nod to a major social movement at the turn of the century, which was there was a sense of the spiritual world. I don't mean like you know, when you ask people like, oh, you know, are you religious? They say, no, I'm spiritual. No, I mean, people actually were talking about, you know, contacting the dead and speaking to the dead.
The design for the Siren began very early on, and when we were first looking at these sort of heavy hitter classes and these very special enemy classes.
So we started thinking about like the ghost of a performer that could be using her song to raise the dead. We started looking at the things that we could do with this kind of mystical, wavy and flowy type of woman who's floating around and raising people with her voice.
So the Siren is an entity who's in contact with the other world and actually can bring Booker's enemies back to life to fight Booker once again. One of your challenges is going to be, who do I deal with? Do I deal with the Siren? Because if I kill her, then all the enemies that she brought back to life will also return to their graves. Or do I deal with the guys who are actually shooting at me? And I think that's one of the sort of real tensions that you have in battle.